Good evening and welcome to My Tunes. I'm Aideen Gormley and I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Veronica Dunne, affectionately known as Ronnie, as my guest this evening. Ronnie has enjoyed a very successful career as an opera singer, both at home and abroad, performing with the likes of Kathleen Ferrier and Joan Sutherland in Covent Garden. And she remains a constant presence in the world of opera, a well-respected vocal musician and teacher. She's a dedicated advocate of vocal music education, and literally hundreds of singers owe their success and careers to her gifted teaching. Ronnie continues to teach aspiring vocal artists, and the Veronica Dunne International Singing Competition has gone from strength to strength. Ronnie, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
It's great to have you here. Do you live, eat and breathe opera?
I do. I love it. I love it. I really love it.
Tell me, growing up, when did you first hear opera?
Well, I remember, I think your grandparents would remember this, wonderful musical evenings we had in our house. Well, not once a month, like everybody with among your friends, maybe every 2 months. But there were musical evenings all over Dublin. Everybody brought their music and there was a sort of a stand-up supper, beforehand. I was allowed to join them when I was 11 years of age. And my brother won the O'Mara Cup singing Éilear Tíbhna. And the family were very proud, He was 14 years older than me. And it was quite amusing to see Mummy and Daddy there. And of course, my mother would be crying when he sang it. She was so proud of him, But
it's interesting, though, as a child liking opera so young. It's not necessarily something a child likes so early on.
No, but I remember this very old-fashioned furniture, and at the top was it was the radio, and we used to get from Milan operas, and my father he adored operas, and we were allowed to stay up at night time to listen to the operas from Milan. But it was always Tuesday night. I remember Martini Rossi. They had a special program from La Scala, and I sat on the floor listening with my ear.
And it was a real treat then for you to sit and listen.
Remember hearing Butterfly, and remember Trovatore,
Yeah.
And particularly the chorus and Faust, and I mean, I loved it. I loved it. I really loved it.
Well, you've really chosen some beautiful recordings for us, Ronnie, to listen to over the next hour. And your first choice is that aria you just mentioned that your brother sang.
It is, yes, with Pavarotti.
The voice of Luciano Pavarotti there, singing from Puccini's Tosca e Luceva le Stelle, and the first music choice of my guest on my tunes this evening, Veronica Dunne. Such a voice. So you enjoyed hearing that, didn't you?
I mean, such breath control.
Yeah.
But, I don't know if you noticed his face and his jaws and his diction is superb. I mean, he actually eats the vowels, you know.
Yeah, and you met him.
He chews them. And I met him when he was in Dublin, and he's a very charming man. Loved to be praised, of course.
Yeah.
Like all tenors.
You were saying to me there when we were listening, Ronnie, that his size was good for his voice.
It's definitely, the mod, I can understand where they're coming from, these producers. They want the perfect image. But you cannot get the body resonance unless you have a certain amount of weight. You really, you can hear the body resonance in his voice, and how he can get the piano to go all around his open throats and all around the body bones, and and sustain that vowel.
Yeah. And does that rule go for both the male and female?
It does, yes. I feel very sorry for the female singers. They're trying to make them into models, and they're not eating properly, and it's very sad. I can see where they're coming from, but at the same time, when you get a voice like that, and also fat women, let's say, like as Callas was very fat, and when she lost her weight, she lost the voice.
Which was very sad, wasn't it?
Oh, it was very sad.
We might come back to Maria Callas shortly. I'm just wondering, if you look at the three tenors, Pavarotti and Carreras and Domingo, would you have a favourite?
No, because they're three different tenors. Pavarotti was lirico spinto, and Domingo was dramatic. He was a shoved up baritone, and a lot of his music is transposed,
Yeah.
a half tone. But I mean, in fairness to him, he is the ultimate, really.
Yeah.
I mean, when you can put in your repertoire that you have sung 2,000 roles. I mean, that is something.
That's pretty good.
And he is a most charming man to meet. Oh my God.
When did you meet him?
I met him when he was in Dublin last time, and he would charm the birds off the trees.
Yeah, he has the looks to match, doesn't he?
I'd be very vulgar. I wouldn't charge him.
He has everything, that's for sure. Tell us, Ronnie, about your own voice being discovered. How did that happen?
Well, that happened actually. My brother, when I mentioned earlier, they turned around to me and he said, "Well, you get up and you sing." And I remember the only song I knew then was The Hills of Donegal, because I went to stay in Sligo and my relations down there thought it to me. And I sang The Hills of Donegal. And I think my mother and father were amazed, because I had a very strong voice for such a young age.
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh my God, we'll have to take her into Hubert Rooney." And I was very lucky that they did bring me to Hubert Rooney, because he used to play for the famous Jean Duresque in Paris for all his lessons. And it was extraordinary. Maggie Tate studied with him, with Jean Duresque.
Gosh.
And I was reading her autobiography. And here in the back are all the exercises, scales, that Hubert Rooney taught me.
Wow.
And it's so wonderful to think, you look back on Jean Duresque, the bel canto. My teacher at a very young age taught me the bel canto. And here I am, passing on, let's say, over 100 years of teaching, maybe 200 years, let's say, to my young students, and who have been very good teachers today.
Yeah. So you're passing it on. But see, so wonderful that you started with such a good teacher. When was the decision made then to send you to Rome?
The war had just ended, and Mother Bodkin was Mistress of Discipline. Oh no, she was Mistress of Studies. And I went into her and she said, "What are you going to do with your life?" I said, "I want to be an opera singer." And I said, "Would you ever write to Milan?" Now this isn't just before the war finished, and asked them if I could come there. And she did, and she called me in, and she said, "No, unfortunately," she said, "you can't go there," she said, "because the nuns advise you not to go, because it's flattened, and there's no food, and there's no water, and things are very bad." So I left school in 1945 then, and I spent a year hunting. I had a pony then. I used to hunt all the time, and you used to hack in those days. There were no cars,
Yeah.
And I used to hack to the hunt from Rathcoole, and it could be in Clonee, Dunboyne, you name it, all over the place. And I'd hack back afterwards. But I decided I'd sell the pony, and I put the pony up for sale.
Because the singing was more important.
And I got 125 for it.
Right.
And I had to give back a $5 for good luck.
Yes.
And it took me a long time to give that $5 back. I argued, and my father said, no, you have to give the good luck back. So Connemara Boy was sold. And I said to Dad, now I want to go to Italy. So he said, you won't get very far in that, child. So I had terrible difficulty trying to get to Italy until I met Delia Murphy. And they were just back from Rome. He was ambassador to the Holy See, and they introduced me to a wonderful man, Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, whom we hope to have a monument to in Killarney. And he rescued 6,000 Jewish people from going to camps.
Gosh.
He hid them all over Rome. He was a wonderful man. Wonderful, very humble man. And he came out to my parents and saw them and said, don't worry, let her come to Rome, I'll look after her. So I went to Rome in 1946.
And he looked after you?
And he certainly did. As I still say about this, when I got off the plane, he said, do you see that plane? Monaccio, he called me. I said, yes, Monsignor, if I catch you with an Italian, he says, you'll be back on it.
That was the warning.
Yeah.
Because you were a young teenager with all these gorgeous Italian men around. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were very handsome, those Italian men.
I bet.
Oh, very handsome.
But you stayed, you stuck to your word.
Well, no, I can tell you the priests in Rome were worse than the FBI. They really were. They knew everywhere I went. You had San Silvestro on the way down, and you had St. Pat's around you. And I lived in Viale Liegi, which I crossed from the Borghese Gardens.
Beautiful.
I was very lucky, very lucky. But it was amazing, though. To go to the opera there was wonderful.
We're going to come back to that in a moment, because I want to hear all about your visits to the opera when you first got to Rome. Tell us about your next music choice there, Ronnie. What would you like to hear next?
My next music choice was one of the first operas I heard as a young child was Mimi and La Boheme. And I never thought I would sing it. And it was one of my favourite operas. But it was wonderful to hear in Rome. And particularly with Magda Olivero, she was a wonderful Mimi. And I used to go every night that she was on. And I used to write the notes, every movement she made on the stage. I still haven't found that notebook at home, but I know it's somewhere in the attic. And I'd love to hear Renata Tebaldi singing with Hugh de Bjorling, O Soave Fanciulla.
Here it is.
che così dolce restar qui, c'è freddo fuori. E al ritorno dammi il braccio mia piccina. Obbedisco, signor, che m'ami io
O Suave Fanciulla from Puccini's La Boheme, the voices of Renata Tebaldi and Jussi Björling, and the music choice of my guest on my tunes this evening, Veronica Dunne. Ronnie, you're quite emotional listening to that.
I was very, very much. Don't stop.
Yeah, it's okay.
No, it's more.
Is it the music or the memories?
Puccini's music is he's the master of melodies.
Yeah.
And I sang, well, I don't know many Mimis, but you always fall in love with Rudolpho when he sings there.
Absolutely.
Jussi Björling is wonderful voice.
And you have chosen quite a few by Puccini actually this evening for us. As you say, you just love his melodies and he pulls at the heartstrings, doesn't he?
Puccini's wonderful, but dangerous to sing, because you get over emotional and you want to give everything. It's exciting. You could hear it in her voice, the excitement of love.
Yeah.
And his excitement in his voice. You know, it's very seldom you get that now, because that's an early recording. And if you listen to Margaret Buck Sheridan with Pertile, once you start, in my day, when you start to sing, you had to keep going.
Of course, yeah.
You know, there's no retakes.
No.
And that's an actual performance.
Exactly, because they just catch that moment.
They catch that moment. And there's more excitement in the old recordings, because they knew that they had only one chance to sing. Talking about Mimi, it was my favourite role because I just loved Puccini is gorgeous.
I think every female opera singer must have a passion for Mimi. What an amazing role. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Bring us back to Rome. You're 19 and you're heading to the opera now to see opera as well as your studies.
Yes.
So who are you seeing and what were you going to see?
Well, this is 1940. Yes, in spring of 1947, they used to have these wonderful concerts in the Argentina Theatre. Now, I had gone to the opera, but I met this woman, Landenius. She was a Swedish woman in Rome, and she said, "Oh, you must come along with me and hear this lovely English singer, Kathleen Ferrier." And I said, "I'd love to," so I went with her. And she had this most glorious voice, really. Oh, what a contralto voice. She sang the Frauenlieben und Leben, which I had studied when I was very young.
Yeah.
And as she went on, and then I was fascinated by her. This wonderful bone structure in her face. Big jaws, like Joan Sutherland had. And as an encore, she sang, "I Will Walk With My Love." And it was absolutely beautiful.
I once loved a boy, just a bold Irish boy who would come and would go at my request. And this bold Irish boy was my pride and my joy, and I built him a bower in my breast. This girl who has taken my bonny, bonny boy, let her make of him all that she can. And whether he loves me or loves me not, I will walk with my love now and then.
The voice of Kathleen Ferrier there, I Will Walk With My Love, a traditional arrangement by Herbert Hughes, and Ronnie Dunne is my guest this evening on My Tunes. What a pure voice she has.
Oh, she had a beautiful voice, a beautiful voice. I went around afterwards actually to get her autograph, and she was such a lady, such a nice person, and she asked me about what I was doing in Rome, and I told her I was studying, and she said, "Oh, how lovely for you to be in such an environment studying in Rome. I wish I could stay longer," but she was off on a tour, you see. And it was interesting because I knew then I would meet her again.
Did you?
And I did in 1952 when I joined the Royal Opera House in Covent Garden, and she came in for rehearsals, and I smiled at her, and I brought over the programme, and she said, "Oh my God." She said, "I can't believe it." She said, yes, I remember that. And she was so wonderful and so lovely that I never knew that this woman was dying with cancer.
Really?
She cancer of the spine, God love her. And she was so healthy, and I mean, Sir John Bobby adored her. We all adored her. And Freddie Ashton was in charge of the Royal Ballet. We had the Royal Ballet on stage, and it was a wonderful production of Eurydice.
Yeah.
Orfeo and Eurydice.
She sounds like she was very supportive of a young singer like yourself, though, coming along and remembering.
She was a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
And she, it was so sad there was only 2 performances.
Oh.
I mean, she turned to me and she said that she wasn't feeling much. The pain is terrible. So I said, well, I'd put my hand up to help her off. We went to the stage left, and she sat down and she was perspiring, and she was such a lovely woman and such a magnificent voice.
But to think, I mean, it's a lovely story you tell of meeting her, side stage in Italy, and next thing being on stage with her in London.
Yes.
What a great journey for you as well.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's really extraordinary.
Yeah, no, it really is.
Extraordinary.
The other singer you were going to see in Rome was, of course, Maria Callas.
Oh, yes. That was the 1947. But it was 1947 I met Kathleen as well.
Quite a year.
And it's quite interesting, yeah. I went to the Caracalla, and it was Turandot, and she had made a debut in Rome, and she was singing Turandot. Well, my God, it was of course, we couldn't afford to go to the front row, and the Caracalla, we were in the back row.
Yeah.
And this woman came out to sing, my God. She went through the walls.
Really?
I mean, the voice was ginormous, and she was fabulous. So naturally, I followed her everywhere. And that following season, they had her singing, Wagner, they had her singing Puritani, she was singing everything. And I used to follow her, and I went to her first performance then, that was in 1952, funny enough. And she that was 1951. And she was singing she opened in Roma with Advocacy, and I went up to Milan, and I got her autograph there as well. I was following her everywhere. And that following year, 1952, she was singing Norma in the Royal Opera House.
Yeah.
I was at that performance. Sir John Tooley invited me along with himself and his wife, and I met her afterwards, and I had the programme, which she signed, and she just couldn't believe it. She was enormous then.
Right.
But it was amazing in that year that I could meet Kathleen Ferrier and Joan Sutherland, and they were part of my life.
Indeed. Gosh. And what was Maria Callas like to meet?
She was very charming,
Yeah.
had a slight American accent, of course, naturally she lived in America, but she was very, very, very charming woman, and most gracious to everybody.
Yeah, how exciting that you saw her. You've chosen a particular aria you'd like to hear
I
this
have
evening.
questa reggia.
Okay, here it is.
In questo reggio or sogni tanti mille, un grido di speranza risuonò. Et quadravo traverso stirpe stirpe, qui dell'anima mia si rifugiò. Principessa
Questa Regia, the extraordinary voice of Maria Callas there in Puccini's Turandot, the choice of my guest on My Tunes this evening, Ronnie Dunne. Ronnie, you were saying you were being brought back to hearing her live there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, what we heard there, I was in the back of the last row of the Cala, which people would know.
Yeah.
And that voice was hitting me against the wall.
Huge
Fantastic.
voice.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was an unbelievable. But she must have been 16 or 17, possibly 18 stone. But she was a very tall woman.
Yeah.
But when she died, she lost 8 stone or 10 stone in 6 months.
Which isn't good.
I mean,
Yeah.
and it's extraordinary. The energy she had from that weight, she lost, and she was using chest voice then, and she actually brought the chest voice up to an octave above middle C, and that stretched the chords outwards,
Right.
and she could only sing that way. It destroyed her voice.
It's so sad. I always think with Maria Callas, if she was such a celebrity as well, her whole image, the story around her life story. I think if there'd been a Hello magazine or an equivalent, then she would have been all over it. She was the celebrity opera
She
singer,
was,
wasn't she?
but actually it was Seraphine, the conductor, who made her diet, and she took a tapeworm, I believe.
Really?
And her husband Meneghini didn't want it, and so I mean it's hearsay now, but it was so sad to hear that voice, and when she was singing, she was singing Tosca in Covent Garden. I went over to hear her, and it wasn't the same voice. It was very sad.
Yeah.
She had a very sad life. She didn't do it for Onassis. It was Seraphine who made her.
Right.
Diet. It's a pity.
It's a sad story. It certainly is. Bring us from Rome to London. Bring us to that move and how it all happened and why it happened.
Well, I was singing. I entered for a competition in February, the Concorso Lirico. I don't know if it's still going. And every month we got through the next round, the next round, the next round. There were 200 sopranos in it, and so many, the equivalent of baritones and tenors, etc. And it took from February to June to adjudicate, to bring you back. Each month you were brought back to sing another round. And, well, you just sing 3 arias each time. And I remember I was singing that season. I brought over the Italians. Bill O'Kelly came to Rome, and he brought all the Italians over to sing. And I remember singing with Carl Rankel. He was the artistic director in Covent Garden. And that was that. And I was doing a concert in Sligo with the Symphony Orchestra, and word came through that I was to be in Milan the next day after the concert. And my brother came down to drive me back, and I was to be on stage in Milan for the final round of the competition. So he drove me back, and the car broke down in Athlone. And we had to get a taxi from there to Dublin. I got in time. I had to fly to London and on to Milan. And I got into Milan, it must have been about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, right into the centre of Milan. Rushed and changed. Was on stage at 5 o'clock.
Wow.
Hadn't slept all night.
Gosh.
And sang, actually, the first act of Boheme, the Mi chiamano Mimi, he sings Kegele. There was another tenor on with me, and I sang Mi chiamano Mimi and that duet. Actually, that's why I got emotional. I mustn't get that way again. It reminded me of that first time I did that in Milan. And I got first place.
Gosh.
In other words, I didn't actually get first place. I was picked with another. There were 5 Mimis picked, and the producer had to pass us.
Right.
But I came back to Ireland. I was given the dates, and that was in June. And I went back to Dublin, and then flew out eventually to Milan, and for the performances, well, for the final round, and I had the opportunity of singing it in Dublin.
Oh, wonderful.
With Carl Rankel. And he was very impressed with me, and I was delighted about that. But then I went over back in June. That would have been the Easter season. And then we were sitting there, and each one of us got the part to sing. Like two of them got the first act, and then the third act, the other two, and then it came to my act, which is the last act. I was very quiet sitting there, kept my mouth shut. The others hadn't done their homework because they hadn't sung it before. I didn't open my mouth. I thought, be a leprechaun here and keep your mouth shut. Yeah. And I got the last act with a tenor. And having had the opportunity of performing in Dublin really won me the prize. I got it.
Brilliant.
And Renata Scotto won in that season L'Amico Fritz.
Wow.
It's extraordinary.
Extraordinary.
And at that performance my first performance was the Earl of Howard and Sir David Webster. He was David Webster then. And they offered me a contract for the Royal Opera House.
So suddenly you're
I went in September to the Royal Opera House and met a most wonderful person there.
Who did you meet?
I met Joan Sutherland. And we immediately, she just arrived there and I just arrived there. And we became great buddies. But her repertoire was completely different to mine.
Of course,
They had her singing everything. Then her voice was beautiful. I mean, she was singing Ballinmascara, and then the next day she would be singing Donna. And the next day she would be singing, they'd have her in Il Trovatore. They didn't know where to put her voice. Mm. And it was Richard, her husband, who decided, this is ridiculous. And it was he who made her sing the Callas repertoire.
That's interesting. The husband spotted it and worked it out. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But she was a lovely person. We used to go to Lyons Corner House there. I don't think it's still there when you come out of the underground. And we used to have chips and sausages. A sausage we got with chips for 1 and 9p.
The glamorous life in Covent Garden.
And we still laughed about it. At the very end, we laughed how the days, when food was bad, and and the Nag's Head is still there, but it's not the same.
Oh. Will we take a listen to Joan Sutherland?
Yes, we will.
Which piece would you like to hear?
Oh, I'd love to hear her singing Pui la Voce and from Puritani.
From Bellini's I Puritani, Chi la voce sua suave, the voice of Joan Sutherland there with the orchestra of the Royal Opera House Covent Garden, conducted by Francesco Molinari Pradelli. The choice of my guest on My Tunes this evening, Ronnie Dunne. Just obviously a very special voice for you, first of all, Joan Sutherland, and a very special friend.
Oh, very special friend. I was invited to her memorial mass in the Westminster Abbey, and I must say I was very, very honoured to be invited.
Yeah.
And I expected to be, among the crowd, but I was brought right up to where, where the partition is, and right into where one of the pews, sitting opposite where the choir sing. And I was very on the front row, and my daughter, of course, flew over. As soon as I got the invitation, she really got on the internet and said, "I'm sorry, my mother wouldn't be able to travel on her own. May I come with her?"
But, I mean, she obviously thought the world of you as well. She came over to adjudicate.
She did after my competition, and we kept in touch, and I had a lovely letter there from I had a memorial mass that you very kindly announced, and I sent the condolence book to Richard, and he was so moved, and he said she didn't realise how famous she was.
Extraordinary.
And he said that she really was very fond of me, and such a friendship to last for so long.
Oh. We have to come to your teaching, the teaching part of your wonderful career, because it's been such an important part of your career. But in terms of your time at Covent Garden, it was at that time you were going to marry and have children, so you really had to make a choice.
Yes, I had to make a choice.
Yeah,
I did, and I had to. Well, it was a hard choice.
Sure, yeah.
Actually, my mother said you can go on as long as you have a nanny to mind the children at home, but when they get to 7 or 8, she said you have to give it up. She was she was too right in life.
Yeah, yeah.
She was one of these know-alls, and she was right, really, in the end. And when it comes to that, you have to do it. So when that happened, when they came to that age, naturally, I had to make a choice.
Right.
Because you couldn't be away from home. You had to watch who they were with and what they were doing. And I happened to teach then, and along came a wonderful person, very loyal person, and a wonderful student, Suzanne Murphy. And I was so proud of Suzanne. She reminded me a lot of Joan. I mean, her top eps were no Queen of the Night she could sing, and Puritani, and all the same repertoire that Joan sang. And she was just a wonderful student, but she was also a wonderful singer. And unfortunately, she didn't get the opportunities to sing in Ireland that she should have got.
Did you know when Suzanne walked in the door as such, this is a voice?
Actually, when she came first, she was afraid, because she had been a pop singer. But this fabulous range was there, but she was afraid to go up too high. So I eventually persuaded her to do Cinderella, Cenerentola. And she did that, and then she got to like it. But before that, she was mezzo. And I kept saying, "No, you're a soprano." And when she went over to Chertongenbosch, and they said, "No, you're not a mezzo, you are a soprano." And she came back and she looked at me, "You're always right, aren't you?" But she had a wonderful voice, Suzanne.
You obviously love teaching, though.
I do. I loved it.
Yeah. And is it that? Do you love when somebody comes in almost raw, that you can mould them and bring this beautiful voice out of them?
It's amazing. You can hear something. I don't know. I think it's a gift from God, and I thank God at night for that gift. But I can spot it. I don't know. They laugh at me and say. And for Anthony Kearns, when he did the competition in Talbot Street, and Gay Byrne's programme was on, and there was for the first £10 note, do you remember?
Yeah.
And he sang a most extraordinary version of Danny Boy, desperate version, and they were all expert singers on it. And I thought, no, that young fella has something.
Right.
And when I said, no, he's got it, I think Gay was furious with me. And when he won the O'Mara Cup, I felt I was dying to go into him. I had been in here in the studio here, and I wanted to go in and tell him that he won the O'Mara Cup, and I wasn't allowed in to tell him.
You were right. You were right. I presume you've also had occasion to tell singers, you know what, this might not be for you.
Yes.
Is that a tough thing to have to do when the voice isn't there and you've someone very enthusiastic who
Well,
really
you
wants
have
to sing?
You have to tell them. You have to be honest with them, because when they walk in the door, I'm accountable that they have to earn their living. And if they're not going to earn their living, you do it politely, and they know themselves.
Yeah. In terms of the students you are teaching, it's important for them to go abroad for the experience, but you do seem saddened that there aren't opportunities in Ireland for them to come back to.
Well, I think it's very sad that we have no opera company in Dublin. We have no major opera company. As I said, the only one that's doing it is Vivian Coates. And Opera Ireland is gone. And we just, for a capital city, I think it's very sad. And I'm sure our minister, for the arts, will look into it.
What would you say to a minister in terms of funding of music and opera? What would you advise?
Well, I think things are bad at the moment, but I would love to tell him and what to do. And if I meet him, I'll tell him.
Yeah, tell him. I have to mention before we finish that you returned to the stage a couple of times now in the last few years yourself, Ronnie. You were in Queen of Spades, Opera Ireland's production.
Yes, I was, yeah.
And in Fiddler on the Roof.
Yes.
One extreme to the other, but
and
both on the Gaiety stage.
I found it so difficult to learn the pitter-patter of that. and Alison Young was Alison, who accompanies a lot of my students. She's a wonderful person. And we go back a long way. And Alison came down and we had so much fun. And I felt like saying, what is it now? A blessing on your head, mazel tov, mazel tov, mazel tov. To see your daughter dead, I used to say mazel tov, mazel tov.
It's a great part though, because it's a great scene, that whole dream scene where you come in. Well, I thought you were great. I saw you and you were brilliant, and lovely to see you on the stage again. Sadly, we're out of time, but you've an interesting final piece for us, Ronnie. What's your final piece of music?
My final piece is Where I Left My Heart. I loved Rome, and every time, here I go again, I leave Rome, I always cry, because the happiest years of my life, 4 happy years, I was never as happy as I was in Rome.
So we're going for a little Mario Lanza. Arrivederci Roma. Here it is.
Ti invidio turista che arrivi, ti imbevi de forri ed scavi, poi tutto d'un tratto te trovi fontana de trevi, che tutta è per te. E mentre il sol tovace il pantalone, la tua canzone in fondo è questa qua. Goodbye, au revoir. Si ritrova a pranzo a Squarciarelli, fettuccine e vino dei castelli, come ai tempi belli che Pinelli immortalò. Arrivederci Roma. Goodbye. A spasso in carrozzella e ripensa a quella ciummachella che era tanto bella e che gli ha detto sempre no.
Fettuccine e vino dei castelli, come i tempi belli che Pinelli in
Arrivederci Roma, goodbye, au revoir. Si riveda spasso in carrozzella e ripensa a quella sciumachella che era tanto bella e che gli ha detto sempre no.
Arrivederci Roma, sung by Mario Lanza, the final music choice this evening of my guest on my tunes, Veronica Dunne. Ronnie, we must say arrivederci as well, sadly.
Arrivederci, a presto.
It's been a joy having you here. I could talk to you for hours, but thank you so much.